So when the basic discipline methods don't solve the problem, we can turn to more advanced skills like the natural and logical consequences or the FLAC method that we'll cover in lesson 5. Remember that a key aspect of responsibility is accepting that what happens to us is a result of our choices. So responsibility equals choice plus consequences. And it stands to reason then that to teach your child responsibility for their actions, you have to give them the freedom to make choices and let them experience the consequences of those choices. Kids learn a lot about what works and what doesn't work from the consequences of their actions. So there's 2 basic types of consequences. We have natural and logical. And in active parenting, we define natural consequences this way: the results that occur from a child's behavior without any interference from a parent or other authority. So examples of some natural consequences might be the natural consequence of forgetting to wear a jacket when it's getting cold. The natural consequence of staying up late on a school night is oversleeping and being late for school the next day. Natural consequence of leaving a bicycle outside may be that it gets rusty or that it gets stolen. Natural consequences are powerful teachers. We have all learned important life lessons that way. Natural consequences work well as teachers because they allow the parents to act as a sympathetic third party rather than the disciplinarian. And in order for these natural consequences to be effective, we want to avoid 2 temptations here. 1, don't rescue your child on a regular basis from the natural consequences of their actions. We're not teaching them anything that way. And 2, don't say, "I told you so," or otherwise lecture your child about their mistake. It's better to just say, "Gee, honey, I really know that's frustrating." Then let the natural consequence do the teaching. My 4-year-old will run around and he will do things I have specifically told him not to do in the past. So the other day, he was running around and he climbed up onto the bed, but he was running at full speed when he climbed up onto the bed and he hit his leg on the end of the bed. So instead of me saying, "How many times have I told you not to do that because you're going to get hurt?" It's not helpful in that situation. I just say, "Oh man, I know that hurt. Maybe we shouldn't do that anymore." So letting the natural consequence teach. There's 3 circumstances in which a responsible parent cannot allow Mother Nature to take its toll. And obviously that's when the natural consequence may be dangerous. The natural consequence of playing in the street may be, getting hit by a car. Or when the natural consequence is so far in the future that the child's not concerned about it. The natural consequence of not brushing your teeth may be that you develop cavities months or years later. We all know that the dangers of smoking don't happen right when you light the first cigarette. It's many, many years later. And then the third one is that when the natural consequence of the child's behavior affects somebody other than the child. The natural consequence of allowing your kids to be rowdy at a restaurant is that it's going to bother the other diners as well as you. Now let's move on to logical consequences. In cases in which you can't rely on the natural consequence to teach your child responsibility, you need to set your own consequences. So in order to teach your child that they are responsible for their choices, the consequence that you set needs to be logically related to your child's misbehavior. And so for that reason, we call it logical consequences. And logical consequences are discipline that's provided by the parent or other authority, which is logically connected to the misbehavior to teach a child to behave within the limits of a situation. So some examples of logical consequences is when Sean repeatedly forgets to bring his dirty dishes into the kitchen after snacking in the den, he loses the privileges of taking food out of the kitchen. Or when Maria posts inappropriate messages on a website, she's not allowed to use the internet for a week. Logical consequences are very different from punishment. Even though the child probably won't like either of them, there are some differences. So logical consequences may be logically connected to the misbehavior, intended to teach the responsibility, given in a firm and calm way. They're respectful. They allow the child to participate. A punishment might not be connected to behavior. It's intended to teach obedience, and it's often delivered with anger and resentment. It's often disrespectful, and it's often dictated by authority. So here we see Dennis and his mom trying to decide his punishment for drawing on the wall. And Dennis says to his mother, "Let me explain, will you?" She says, "All right, go ahead." He says, "Go ahead." And she said, "Yeah, I want to hear this." And the character drawing in the background says, "Me too." And Dennis says, "Wait a minute. I'm getting too big to sit in the corner." And Mom says, "Maybe you're right." And Dennis says, "Yeah, right." And Mom says, "Let's see, how could I punish you instead? Maybe a spanking?" And Dennis says, "No, I'm way too big for that." She says, "No dessert for a week?" He says, "Oh, Mom, that's kid stuff." She says, "I know just the thing." And he said, "Oh, what?" And she said, "Wash every bit of it off and don't slop the water around." And Dennis says, "Wash it off?" And so he starts to wash it off. And he says, "Boy, this stuff sure does go on a lot easier than it comes off." Moments later, she can't find him. "Dennis!" And Dennis is sitting in the corner. He says, "Right here in the corner, Mom, being sorry I done it." So we can see that kids do have logical, there are logical ways to discipline children, logical consequences. You write on the wall, we clean it off.